The highest of the high-ups in the so-called Democratic Party of the United States of America have been at it again. After a set by a comedian called Tony Hinchcliffe at the Donald Trump rally in Madison Square Garden in New York City, during which he said, "I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. I think it's called Puerto Rico." Sitting but largely absent in so many ways, and in the face of the faux liberal outrage, President Joe Biden chose to tell his fellow citizens that the only floating garbage he was aware of were Trump supporters. Here is the man himself.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of things is unconscionable, and it's un-American.
Nice. So, Americans who have or plan to vote for the front-running Republican candidate are, in the addled mind of their president, garbage. Ah, memories. Remember back in 2016 when Hillary Clinton coined her line about Trump supporters being a basket of deplorables? If you don't remember, here she is.
You can put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. But that other basket of people are people who feel the government has let them down, the economy has let them down, nobody cares about them.
So, listen to those words, ruminate on those sentiments: racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic. You know, unfortunately, there are people like that, and he, being Donald Trump, has lifted them up. Basket of deplorables is arguably, I suppose, well, it's a more polished, erudite line. It may be the product of some thought in advance, which probably makes it even worse than the garbage ad-lib. But the sense is the same. For years now, the Democratic Party of the US, once upon a time the party of the people, has made plain, abundantly clear, what it thinks of those who have the temerity to not vote Democrat. Deplorable garbage. They've recently been calling Donald Trump Adolf Hitler, saying he's a would-be tyrant. They've been defaming his supporters as Nazis. No matter how they spin it, even try to walk it back, these sentiments are not pretty. They are, however, revealing. They're revealing of the fact elite Democrats are looking at empathy and reasoned discourse in the rearview mirror. By now, all else in their repertoire having failed or being in the process of failing, they have hit the buffers of plain old playground name-calling. The Democrat Party, the party of John F. Kennedy, who said many things, including, just as a for instance, when power leads man towards arrogance, poetry reminds him of his limitations. When power narrows the area of man's concern, poetry reminds him of the richness and diversity of existence. When power corrupts, poetry cleanses. The party that once hallowed that richness and diversity of humankind, or at least appeared to, now blatantly sees alternative points of view and those who might hold them as deplorable garbage. Now, that's quite the evolution. That's quite the fall from grace. It's easy to laugh at cheap jibes, but it matters to notice where they come from. They come from a place where the spoiled and indulged rich and powerful have so persuaded themselves of their own rightness, their own entitlement to power, that anyone and everyone who sees the world differently must have something wrong with them, must be by nature inferior, must be an infestation of something unwanted in need of eradication. I mean, what do you do with garbage except bury it or burn it? Dropping the mask and saying out loud that those opposed to your point of view are stupid and deficient is only the end point of a long process of holding other people in contempt. The Democratic Party was the party of slavery. The Democrat Party fought the Civil War to maintain slavery. There's a case to be made that in cozying up to civil rights in the 20th century, the Democrats swapped the idea of owning Black Americans for persuading Black Americans they should see themselves as dependent always and only on the Democratic Party. So instead of owner and property, the relationship was manipulated and metamorphosed into one of, parent and child, helpless child. Both positions come from a place of seeing others as less, as lesser. That people should ignore the evidence of their eyes, the experience of their own lifetimes, and just fall into line. You saw it clearly enough in 2020 when Joe Biden told Black American listeners to a radio show that he was taking part in, well, the following.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump and you ain't black.
I can't get over those words. If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or for Trump, then you ain't black. And you saw the same, the assumption of ownership, of the right to tell others what to do when Barack Obama spoke to Democrat supporters in Pittsburgh.
We have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. Now, I also want to say that that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers.
Brothers? Really? Before tootling back to his palace on the beach in Martha's Vineyard? Brothers? After Obama said that, a former state representative from Georgia, Vernon Jones, said the former president had been sent out by the Democratic Party to, quote, whip black men on the plantation to vote Democrat. The US political elite are not stupid people, but in their frustration with a perceived threat to their presumed right to rule, they've opted for stupid statements and sentiments. The problem is as old as time, in that power corrupts and has corrupted. Those elites have persuaded themselves of their innate superiority. This is what happens when you take stupidity and cook it low and slow for generations. You end up with what we see, a thick stock of stupid in its most concentrated form. The New York Times this week just past saw fit to try and bully YouTube into suppressing conservative voices like Tucker Carlson, like Ben Shapiro. And then when Jeff Bezos of Amazon said writers on his newspaper title, The Washington Post, couldn't openly endorse Kamala Harris within his pages, writers, including former columnist and editor-at-large Uber neocon historian Robert Kagan, spat their dummies out and stomped off in a huff. Some of the stupid in politics, not just in the US but everywhere, is Marxism. One of the stupidest ideas of all time, if you ask me. Karl Marx was no economist. He was a would-be theologian, hoping to cook up a new religion. He filched and scrounged off family and friends his whole life. for all that he wrote about it, he never made any capital. He just spent other people's capital on fine food and cigars. He knocked up the help behind his wife's back and abandoned the boy to be raised by Engels, the prime host for parasite Karl. Marxism is the grift that keeps on taking. The worst of what has become of US left liberal politics is that it's utterly blind to the value of the variety of humanity. Rather than see potential in that variety, it sees only difference, the unwanted, intolerable other. A.J. Liebling was a US writer who wrote about all sorts, politics, boxing, food. Time spent in Paris in the 1930s, I think, taught him something profound. He saw that the best of food was the product of seeing the potential in the most humble of ingredients. Humble ingredients given the chance to give all they had to give. And he wrote, "A man who is rich in his adolescence is almost doomed to be a dilettante. This is not because all millionaires are stupid, but because they are not impelled to experiment." The hereditary political elites in the US, but also in Britain, in Europe, are not just dilettantes, they are spoiled brats. Liebling wrote that they suffer the crippling affliction of affluence. And so they look out at those who disagree with them, who simply don't care for them, and see deplorable garbage, and dismiss black Americans who don't vote Democrat as nothing more or less than plain stupid, not even properly black. I honestly don't know how Democrats, including white Democrats, can hear themselves saying these things and not just curl up and blow away on the wind in utter shame. Everywhere we see parties that once claimed to champion the people, the little guy, instead going out of their way to crush those people's souls instead. Here in Britain, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves' first budget, well, as far as I can see, it's dismissed working aspirational people as, well, fit only for dulling their pain with slightly cheaper beer, while having what little remains of their hard-won income robbed away and sent for laundering through the charnel house of Ukraine, forever. The US political elite, like ours here in Britain, are often hard to listen to now, excruciatingly so. Name-calling and spite, corruption laid bare, if not displayed with pride. Here's the thing. Recall, if you will, how it used to be when a politician like Abraham Lincoln could and would quote the Bible and remind his fellow citizens that a house divided against itself cannot stand. How quickly they forget. Or what he said on March the 4th, 1861, at the closing of his first inaugural address, part of taking the oath of office as president. "I am loath to close. We are not enemies but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection, the mystic cords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature." Those were the days, Abe. Those were the days. To stay up to date with US politics, including the upcoming election, don't forget to subscribe to GBN America on YouTube.